Thank you for having me this evening. I'm Steve Flavell, co-CEO of LoopUp. LoopUp is in the world of conference calls or remote meetings, and we have a sort of software as a service product, a cloud-based product for remote meetings, business meetings. And we're all about trying to make them just less bad, really, as an activity for far more people. We're going to, first of all, look at our strategy in the market. We do have a highly differentiated strategy compared with the other software firms in this space. And we'll come on to look at some of the commercial results and also some of the underlying metrics to those results, which are very important to us. And then look out into the future. You know, how is the business sort of set to scale operationally and for distribution? So this market really starts with an observation. Our strategy, I guess, starts with an observation. Conference calls have been around for many, many years, over 25 years. And it's unusual and perhaps surprising that so many people in the world, in the business world, are still dialing in to conference calls. I don't know if this is an activity many of you do, but there is a classic way of getting into a conference call, which is you dial a phone number, it'll say, welcome to your meeting, and it'll ask you for an access code that you punch into your phone. This has been the method for over 20 years. And even in today's world of software, with so much technology that's been thrown at this market, still, nearly 70% of the business world aren't using such software. They're still dialing into conference calls with phone numbers and access codes. And it begs the question of why? Why have more people not adopted something better? There is an adoption problem in this market. It's not the lack of technology, it's the lack of real user adoption. What doesn't ring true is that people are dialing in because they like it. Dialing conferencing, I think, is far from most people's sort of favorite daily activity. It's quite fraught with common frustrations and annoyances. These are just three sort of classic things you hear on many conference calls. Who just joined they're possibly the three most said words of all time on conference calls. You come on the meeting and you've got boop boop, who just joined, and this can happen several times in the course of a meeting. You perhaps don't know who's speaking. You've dialed in to a phone and punched your number in. You know you're on, but as to who else is on and who's speaking, you really don't have any visibility over that call. And classic issues like background noise, the person in an airport, the tannoys going in the background with plane announcements or whatever, or at a train station, and all this noise is being brought into the conference call and disrupting it. These are just three of the classic frustrations, and they lead to a lot of wasted time. A survey of 1,000 frequent conference callers suggested that about a third of time is wasted on conference calls due to these sort of classic frustrations and annoyances. Let alone the security connotations. If you've got people asking who just joined on your conference call, there's something wrong there, right? It's in today's world where companies are understandably and rightly investing so much in cybersecurity, why is this okay in today's world? So why is it then, if it's not that people like dialing in with numbers and codes to their conference calls, why do they still do it? And we've noticed 4 things going on with the software products in this market that we believe contribute to this lack of adoption of those software products. The first is that these software options in the market tend to at least promote, some of them actually require, but they tend to at least promote a software download. Now, you can often with the products find an escape route, but you have to try quite hard to find that escape route where you're not made to download that software onto your computer. And for many, not all, but for many, this can be a real barrier. Many people in larger companies won't have permission even to put software on their computer, even if they wanted to. And then there'll be many others who perhaps can put the software on their computer, but choose not to. Perhaps they're running late for the meeting. It's often the way with conference calls, people joining last second, and they don't have time to download that software. Or perhaps they'd just rather not add another piece of software that they don't perhaps recognize to their computers. It's one contributory factor, but you can see how it might be a blocker for many. The second is all to do with cameras on computers and tablets and phones. Many of the software products in this market encourage you to turn your cameras on when you join the meeting. Now, some will actually turn your camera on for you when you join the meeting. There's no option at all. And actually, you see many people now with little covers over their cameras. It's one of the most popular giveaways at sort of business conferences these days, is these little things that go over your computer camera so that you don't get caught by things like this. Now, they don't all do that auto turn on, but nearly all of them will at least heavily encourage you to turn your camera on when you join the meeting, because they're trying to promote video on their meetings. Now, that's all right for some. Some will love that. Some will require their being on camera for their meetings. But for many people, this can be off-putting. It might not be the right situation to be on video. Perhaps you're taking the call from bedroom or something, or or perhaps you'd just rather be getting on with a bit of work whilst you're on the call. You're listening in, but you're also doing a little bit of email, and you don't want to be smiling on camera throughout the 45 minutes. You can see again how, not for everyone, but for some, this might be a blocking factor in adopting the software options in this market. Nearly all of the software products in this market promote what's called VoIP, Voice over Internet Protocol, where you actually participate in the audio side of the meeting on your computer or on your device rather than on a normal phone. Now, again, for many, this is absolutely fine. Some like that, speaking into headsets and talking into their computers, but many don't. Many would prefer to use a proper phone. And in some cases, actually, for very good reason, because on proper phones, you're always going to have a reliable quality of service to that audio. When you're speaking into your computer, it could be great a lot of the times, but from time to time, it might not be. Your voice is often, at least, traveling over the public internet, which essentially makes it no better in terms of reliability than a FaceTime call or a WhatsApp call. And for important business conference calls, they really need to be right every time. So again, some people won't mind this at all, but you could see how some might be put off by that. And finally, a big one, which is many of these products tend to be very feature-rich. They have lots of features and bells and whistles to them, which sounds great. But think about the environment you're in when you're being asked to use these pieces of software. You're live on a meeting. You're in real time, and what's more, you're in real time with lots of other people, your guests, who tend to be important to you and matter to you on that meeting. Last thing you want is to mess up the software and not know what you're doing and get it wrong. And you just want that meeting to go well. Dialing in with numbers and codes is at least, even though it's not very good, it's a safe play that at least everyone can do, right? All your guests you need to worry about as well. They may have different levels of comfort with the software, whereas everybody can dial a phone number and put a code in. So look, with all these four things combined, you can perhaps see will begin to empathize with why the adoption levels of software in our market are as low as they are after all this time, and why so many people still dial in. And with LoopUp, what we're doing very differently is to take a different approach to all of those 4 dimensions. There are no downloads with LoopUp's remote meeting product. Cameras are not turned on when you join the meeting. You're not even asked, let alone forced, to turn your camera on when you join the meeting. We think that video and cameras are actually only a good idea on a certain proportion of meetings. Sometimes they'll be very valuable, other times they'll be actually probably neither wanted nor needed by the guests. So we let that decision rest solely with the host. Guests aren't even asked to turn their cameras on unless and until the host says so. And that happens after they've joined. All the audio for LoopUp's product goes over high managed quality of service Tier 1 telephony carriers. We don't allow you to speak into your computer because there will be a certain percentage of those calls over the public internet where it's not good enough. And on enterprise conference calls, that just doesn't work for so many people. And finally, we keep stuff out of the product. The whole sort of design is kind of less is more. It has very few features to it. We deliberately don't put things in unless they're required by really the mainstream majority. And it's designed very much such that you can just use it in the heat of the moment. No training is required to use the product because we keep so little in it. So as you can see, a different approach to the market. So next section is what's it leading to? What are some of the results of that? And let's start with a sort of a high-level one, but perhaps come on to the more important ones in a moment. These are our financials. You can see it's been performing well at the end of the day. We've been growing nicely as a company. These are to scale with one another as well. So you can see it's a good gross margin product. And it's profitable all the way down the P&L and very much increasingly so. This is arguably, though, the most important metric in our business. We obsess over this the whole time, which is to what extent are LoopUp users no longer dialing in to their conference calls? Our reason for existing, as we've just talked about, is to get greater adoption than the world has seen so far from the software products on offer, to get greater adoption of software and to stop so many people dialing in with numbers and codes. And this is how we're doing on it. LoopUp users are now not dialing in on their calls 76% of the time. They're using our software on 76% of their meetings, which is an extremely strong level of engagement compared with the other products in the market. And that strong engagement leads to really good retention metrics. We keep our customers well. These are quoted as churn metrics rather than retention, but it's the same opposite. So we quote 2. One is sort of our loss rate, the gross revenue churn rate. This is, if you look at companies that leave us, what percentage of our established base is leaving us every year. And it's very low, it's 5.5%. And if you look back over our historic accounts, you'll see it's always been actually between 5 and 6% very consistently. So a very low loss rate of customers. And the second metric is a net churn metric. If you include certainly those customers that leave, but if the ones that don't leave, the 95% retained, if you include their additional usage and their growth, we actually achieve what's called a negative net churn or net growth in our long-term established customer base. Now, this doesn't include any new business. Obviously, we're growing with new business, but this is all customers that have been with us for 2 years or longer. So, they've ramped up, and this is then looking at that effect in that long-term base, and it's net growing. Final metric to share with you is on our new business acquisition, our new business or sales metrics. And here we quote this in terms of the return on investment for every pound we invest in new business sales. And you can see that, firstly, it's been very consistent over the years, but I'll talk you through these economics a little bit. So for every pound we invest, we get 73 pence of gross margin that we didn't have before. But the key, that probably doesn't sound very good at the first blush, but the key thing is it recurs for a long time. So that 73 pence of gross margin then recurs for, expectedly at least, many years. Now we're in a technology business and it's hard to put a sensible number on that, but you've seen the retention metrics. So that 73 pence of gross margin is going to get every year for a good number of years for that £1 of investment. These are very compelling software as a service economics. Operationally, how are we set to scale? And we'll look at two aspects. Firstly, organic growth. And we work in our organic growth, our new business acquisition, in the system that we call pods. It's essentially team-based selling as opposed to eat what you kill, individual-based selling. And we divide our new business team up into little groups of 6 or 7 people. We call them pods, but they're essentially like little mini companies, actually with their own quasi-P&Ls, and they are incentivized solely as a team. They work to very standard and rigorous sort of methods and metrics, which we continually try to innovate, but they're all doing the same thing, which leads to a very consistent set of returns as well. And the impact of working in teams this way rather than individuals are a few things. Firstly, we speak to sort of this best foot forward approach. In classic software sales, you've got people going out and they're going to hog their opportunities because they're commissioned as individuals and they want to take their own deals and win their deals. The problem with that is that it can lead to people inappropriately hogging opportunities. You can have relatively junior people in the team who keep an opportunity rather than sharing it and getting an appropriate sort of set of resource going to those meetings. Whereas in these pods, if it makes sense for 3 or 4 people to go to a new sales meeting, then they're incentivized that way to do the right thing. The group can play to each other's strengths. If some people are better at some things than others, perhaps somebody's good at researching companies, perhaps somebody's good at vetting inbound opportunities, perhaps someone's better on the phone. They can all work to their respective strengths for the good of the whole pod. It's also, on the other side of things, quite self-policing. If you do have a free rider in the pod, that's not pulling their weight or is a bit divisive in the team, that pod wants that person out because they're impacting their team bonus. So it's quite a nice sort of self-policing mechanism as well to sort of highlight situations that need attention. And finally, I think this is a really important one. They have a good sense of ownership here. This is their own. It's like their own little company, and they have pride on that, and it's quite healthily competitive between the pods. This needs a bit of explaining. I'll do it briefly as to how they grow. In a pod of 6 people, there tend to be 3 more junior ones and 3 more senior ones. And it tends to take about 18 months to move from a more junior to a more senior. Now, these are university leavers generally. So when they go up, you only need 3 people of a senior level in the pod. So as there become too many senior people, they sort of mushroom out and form their own new pods, and then you backfill them with more new graduates. And so the system naturally grows, and it grows at about 25% per annum, just by feeding it with new graduates. That's great. We have introduced something this year to try and accelerate that a little bit more, which is to start to recruit career change people into those more senior roles. These may be people who have been in the armed forces or sports people. Always people who have never done sales. We never recruit anyone into LoopUp sales who's ever sold before. We like to sort of teach them our ways. So but this is people with a little bit more sort of life experience that can come in at that level above. And this has been an exciting addition for us that's going well so far. We've been doing marketing. We started our marketing in 2018. Prior to 2018, we'd actually never done any before. All our growth had come just through word of mouth and outbound reach. But we did a tube campaign in spring of 2018, and that was the start of our marketing activity. And we saw an effect which was, with no marketing, we were getting about 30% of our new business coming to us. It's like a network effect in the product almost, because we have a lot of guests on meetings who aren't customers. They come to us. But that went up to 48% through that initial pieces of marketing in 2018. So clearly it was working, even though it's at a very low budget. And that budget was about £1 million in 2018. So on the back of that success, we've increased it this year, still modestly, to 1.7. We've been doing various things. We've taken sort of distressed inventory at sporting events. So this was the Wales-Ireland rugby game and final game of the Six Nations. We've done a tube campaign on the subway in New York. We've done various events, lots of events actually. This was an event for executive assistants we did in London a couple of months ago. We've done video brochures to our database of known decision makers, IT decision makers. So an investment in telling our story through a video brochure. And, it's early days because it's marketing, so, it has to go through the sales cycle. But the grassroots, the green shoots, if you like, are very promising. This has led to 50% more target market customer meetings than we had in the equivalent period last year. So again, on a modest budget, we're very pleased with the early results of inbound marketing. Final thing, just take a couple of minutes on this. We bought a company last year. We acquired a company called Meeting Zone last June. We bought them for £64 million. And the idea really was they had a product which was essentially dial-in, a conferencing product, numbers and codes. And we thought if we could take that dial-in conferencing business and transition it over to our LoopUp platform, we could add value to that business. Firstly, we could change its characteristics of retention. Their business was net churning at around 10%, whereas as you saw, ours is actually net growing. So we thought we could add value in that sense. A very important part of the argument was this 30% network effect that we talked about a minute ago. We get 30% of our new business through a network effect in the product. So if we could add scale to our platform, have more LoopUp meetings going on, the thinking was that it will amplify this network effect. And finally, it was clear we could take cost out of the system. It was very clear. Even 4 months after the acquisition, we had taken out over £3 million of annualized overhead out of the 10 million base. So that's all done. We're in that transition project. It's a two-phase project. Firstly, a more managed approach to the larger customers, and then at the end of this summer, we'll be sort of lifting and shifting all of the other customers over to the LoopUp platform, the longer tail. And it's early days, of course, but of the first customers that we've transitioned, this is just defined by the first 10. We've included the first 10 because they are all of the way out the other side. The blue is Meeting Zone revenue. That was the company we acquired. The green is LoopUp revenue. So you can see the first 10 that we did have completely moved over now. And there's been a very good revenue uplift. Those 10 companies are spending 34% more over those 3 months, March to May this year versus March to May the previous year. So very early doors, but promising start. And that's it. It's a differentiated approach, very different to the other software companies in the market. It's leading to good metrics that justify the strategy. People really are stopping dialing in, and quite compelling SaaS economics. and operations that are built to scale.
Steve, thank you very much indeed. Okay. Do you have any questions for Steve, please? Gentleman at the back first, and then we'll come to you.
What's the cost per user?
The cost per user, so the revenue model, how we charge for it is a number of pence per minute per guest on the meeting. So it's a pay for what you use revenue model as opposed to a license fee, which is how the software players in the market tend to charge for their products. It's another difference, actually. If you don't use the product, you don't pay anything. If you use it, you pay based on pence per minute per guest.
And do you have people moving over from sort of Skype, which I know comes with Office, to you?
From Skype to us?
Yes.
We do. It's not the most common route to move to us. The most common people we win business off are the dial-in conferencing providers in the market, because that's essentially what we're targeting. We're trying to stop people from dialing in with numbers and codes. You know, the 68% of behavior still in the world. So we most often win business from companies that offer dial-in conferencing, which are the likes of the telcos, so AT&T, Verizon, BT. There are specialists like Intercall and Arcadin. This is most generally who we win business off. But to your question about Skype in particular, and other software providers as well, such as WebEx and GoToMeeting and products like that, we do, because you find that there is a actually high amount of dial-in usage even on those products. So our sort of reason for existing, if you like, applies actually often, not always, but often to customers who have moved on to software products, but they're just not using them particularly well. They're dialing in still with numbers and codes.
Gentleman here? Thank you, Chris.
I'm interested in the customers that you're taking on. Is there a particular industry or size of company? Mm-hmm. It seems to me that you probably do an awful lot better with larger companies than small ones. Can you comment on those points?
Sure, and you're right. So we target two types of companies. We target mid to large size customers, to your point, and in that sense, it's quite broad across sectors. All companies really need to have meeting products, so it applies across sectors. But in mid to large, in the bigger part of the market, they tend to have more offices and more people working from home and all that sort of stuff. So they have a higher need for this sort of product than a small business. The second type of company that we tend to target comes down into the SMB market. But there we tend to be quite focused on professional services verticals. So sectors like law, corporate finance, private equity, consulting, PR, where they have so many client-facing remote meetings as part of their day-to-day business life. And they're particularly important meetings, therefore, obviously, as well, that the product can add value to. So professional services is a very significant sweet spot, if you like, for LoopUp, albeit the product applying quite broadly across sectors.
Thank you. A gentleman behind, please, Chris.
Hi, I'm interested in finding out how it actually works. And do you need a PC to be online? And does that PC need a phone line as well, or is it web-based?
So what you absolutely need is a phone. that's the only must-have requirement. You must have a phone. Because if you're going to participate on a meeting, I think it's fair to say you have to be able to speak. So we do require you to have a phone. The PC is an optional thing, and it could be a PC or a tablet or a smartphone. An internet-connected device with LoopUp is going to give you a better meeting experience. You're going to, on that PC or tablet, you're going to be able to have a readout of who's on the meeting. Down the left-hand, just get the product up. Down the left-hand side here, I'll take a step back. So it starts with joining a meeting. Okay, so in the invitation that the host sends out to their guests, there are two things. Sorry?
Do you receive that via a PC?
Via a
or-
PC or on your phone. You receive it by email or as a calendar appointment, depending on how the host sends it out. But you'll either receive an email or a calendar invite. And in the invitation, there'll be a link, which is what you want you to use, and a set of dial-in numbers. Now, we don't want people to use the dial-in numbers, but ironically, if you don't put them in, people get scared and then don't use the product at all. So you can't ask people to go cold turkey with dial-in. You have to put the numbers in. But we want people to click the link. And if you click the link, we ask you for your name and number, and it remembers that if you've done it before, and then you press go. And when you press go, we immediately call you on that phone number. Now, your phone rings, you pick it up, and having picked up the phone, the page where you asked to be called turns into this. Okay? So you're guided to a web page where you can see down the left all the guests on your meeting. You can see who's speaking up here. And then this zone is used for any media. It might be used for cameras if you're on video conference. It might be used for a presentation if you're sharing a document or a presentation with your guests.
Yeah. So if you're actually on a train and dialing into one of these things and you lose your internet connection, can you still be a participant?
Absolutely, because the audio is going over proper phones. Okay, so if you're on a train, you may get a dodgy video signal here, and people may break up or disappear or freeze because you've lost internet connection. But the audio is separate to this. You've requested a call to your phone, your proper phone. So the audio is independent of the internet connection and will be maintained even if you have dodgy internet or broken up internet. And that's really important.
Yeah. So unless you're in a tunnel for a long time or something, then it'll
Yeah.
carry on. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
We're out of time, but I'm going to take that one last question because you have been waiting patiently.
Just a final question. What percentage of your client base is from the public sector? Bearing in mind that public sector has quite a lot of interaction with the private sector, and the security aspect of of your technology might be an issue.
A negative issue or a positive one?
It could be either way.
Yeah. So I think it's firstly on security, just before coming to the public sector. I think, we work with lots of leading law firms and corporate finance houses and M&A houses, that are doing very sensitive calls with their clients. So security is just such a big deal on these calls. And we do all the things in the background that you would think we'd need to do. It's kind of table stakes to even go and talk to these companies. The big difference with security, though, with LoopUp, is that far more often the host is going to be looking at a screen where they see all the people on their meeting. They know who's on. It's not like who just joined, where you don't really know who's on your meeting and who's not. The product offers real, proper, enhanced security on a real-world basis. So I think it's a big positive on that. To your public sector question, prior to the acquisition of Meeting Zone, it really wasn't a part of the market that we'd concentrated on. The market is huge. We're a tens of £1 million revenue company in a £5 billion market. There is so much market to go after. And the thing we always thought about public sector is, if we're going to do it, we'll do it in a concerted way at the right time. Whereas for now, there's so much other market to go after. It was a thing unto itself that we thought we'd do later. However, with the acquisition of Meeting Zone, we have acquired actually quite a lot of public sector companies, and it has encouraged us to take that step ahead of time now. So we are now proactively looking into the public sector because they do a lot of meetings, and I think it would be a great market for us. This gives us now a foundation to build on that I think makes it sensible for us to do it properly now.
Thank you very much indeed, Steve. Thank you very much, everyone, for coming this evening.